Good morning. Hello, everyone from Austin, Texas, and thank you all for joining us today. And welcome to today's first webinar in our Research Integrity Workshop series. My name is Leah DeForest, and I'm the Communications Manager with Texas Digital Library. And I'm also joined today by Courtney Muma, TDL's Deputy Director. So Texas Digital Library is grateful to our members, many of whom are here with us today, who put your trust in TDL to provide essential infrastructure and services like digital preservation, digital repository hosting, and tools for managing research data and ETDs. We invite any institution interested in becoming part of our consortium to reach out to us. We need you. We need your energy and expertise to continue growing the digital library community in this region. And we're especially interested in partnering with our colleagues at HBCUs across Texas. I invite you to join TDL and connect with our amazing, fun, brilliant community of librarians and archivists. So we at Texas Digital Library are big fans of Bill and Ted, as you may or may not know, and this is because they are most triumphant, but also and especially because they believe in being excellent to each other. And we at TDL ask that you also be excellent to each other. We are dedicated to providing an experience for everyone that is free from all forms of harassment and inclusive of all people. We ask that everyone here today be considerate and respectful in speech and action, attempt collaboration before conflict, refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior in speech, and please be mindful of your environment and your fellow participants. Finally, a little housekeeping. Please keep your microphones and videos muted until our Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Presenters will also keep their mics and video muted until it's their turn to present. We hope you'll use the chat box to say hello and let others know you're here, make comments throughout. We also have a little poll going that I hope you'll take a look at and add your thoughts to. And if you have a question, please type it into chat. Again, we'll have time for questions at the end, and I'll share the questions with today's presenters on a first come, first served basis. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. We will publish slides and recordings and share them all with all of you in attendance today after we have them captioned, and we'll be publishing those on our website as well. Okay, on with the show. So many thanks to today's presenters for allowing us to learn from your experience. Our presenters today are Dr. Bruce Herbert. He's the director of the Office of Scholarly Communication at Texas A&M University, and Melody Hare, PhD. She is the head of the Office of Scholarly Communications at the University of Arkansas. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand things over to you all.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, I figured out how to unmute, so I think I'm ready.
Go ahead, Melody.
I apologize.
Take it away.
Yeah. Okay, so I am gonna go here and share. And
perfect.
Are we good?
Yep, hit the first slide. There you go.
Okay. So, as you know, everyone who participates in research shares responsibility for ensuring integrity throughout the research cycle. And this two-part virtual workshop is designed for library and information science professionals who conduct research themselves, assist researchers in any discipline, or provide instruction in any aspect of research. So during this first workshop, we're going to present the concept of research integrity and demonstrate its practical applications through a case study. During the second workshop, you're going to learn how to build a modular instructional program for the students and faculty at your own institution. You'll also have the opportunity to earn a letter of recognition for your participation by designing an instructional module for one research integrity topic. So unfortunately, we hear more about research misconduct than research integrity. So let's talk about misconduct for just a moment. The National Science Foundation recognizes 3 categories of misconduct: fabrication, which means making up data or results; falsification, which means manipulating research materials, equipment, processes, or changing or omitting data or results; Plagiarism means grabbing another person's ideas, processes, results, or words without giving credit. Please note that honest errors and differences of opinion are not misconduct. So why is misconduct bad? Because of the astronomical costs of research, even a few cases may waste millions of dollars. In 2017, the National Academies calculated that a total of several $100 million a year would be a reasonable conservative estimate of the direct financial costs of research misconduct. However, as this graphic shows, misconduct has many non-financial costs as well. It may imperil the welfare of individuals and society, and equally important, misconduct threatens the very foundation of science, which is trust. Fellow scientists, research sponsors, lawmakers, and the general public must be able to count on the integrity of research. But now, let's talk about research integrity. On this slide, I've listed the core values of research: honesty, fairness, openness, accountability, objectivity, and stewardship. These values are the foundation stones for integrity, and researchers in every discipline, the sciences, the social sciences, and the humanities, share these same values. This week, I was working on an Introduction to Research Integrity module for undergraduates here at Arkansas. And one of my colleagues suggested there might be a sports analogy. So I did a little research and I went on the NCAA website, which is, as you know, the National Collegiate Athletics Association. And I discovered that the values that they list for athletics map almost one-on-one with the values that we have listed here for research. So I think it's something to keep in mind that research and athletics have something in common, and this might be a way to connect with undergraduates. So the formal definition of research integrity provided by the National Academies declares that research integrity means those involved in research strive to exemplify the values in every step of the research process: planning, proposing, performing, and reporting their work, reviewing proposals and work by others, training the next generation of researchers, and maintaining effective stewardship of the scholarly record. So I'm going to hand it over to Bruce.
Outstanding. Let me share my screen here. Come on. Go through our slides. Yep. So what we're going to make a case today, and I think you'll like it, is that I want to make a case that the libraries have significant roles to play in building research integrity across your campus, particularly through workshops and trainings that are very similar to the types of trainings that we run for helping students understand how to do literature searches or use tools like reference managers or things like that, that you could add research integrity workshops to your portfolio of topics that you cover, because in large part, many of the aspects that libraries can help in are part of the issues that can come up around research issues. And so when Melody starts talking about the large cost of issues in around research misconduct or just poor research practices that diminish the integrity of research, the real challenge to our community is that a lot of scholarship is built on trust. We need people to trust the results of what we develop. And they can only do that if they have faith or belief that we're engaged in practices that have integrity, that are following good practices. So we got to maintain that trust. And then when you lose that trust, it's really troublesome. Come on, no, just click. This would be a good time to, if you'd like to say something, to unmute yourself. But what it'd be interesting to see if people had some idea of why people engage in research misconduct, or why they engage in sloppy practices. As I was telling Melody and Leah just before, I saw a wonderful talk a couple of years ago by the judge who tried the Enron case here in Texas. If you remember, that was the company down in Houston that manipulated the natural gas market and kind of brought California to its knees. And what he said was really interesting is when that case unraveled and they tracked what the company had done and the officers in that company had done, the people in the company had not made the choice between good and evil. What they had made the choice was between good and easy. And so they often cut corners, made the easy choices, the easy thing to do. And so this graph is from a National Academy of Sciences report, Fostering Integrity of Research. I highly recommend it if you're interested in learning more and completing the project, where we actually guide you through the development of your own workshops or workshop plan. It's really, really good. And this diagram comes from there. So if you look at an individual researcher, what are some of the incentives that might drive researchers to cut corners? And I'll bet those of you that are on the tenure track would actually know them yourself. Is anybody willing to jump in and talk?
I will.
Go ahead, Carolyn. You know what this feels like. What would you say?
Oh, lots of pressure to publish, and not just publish, but publish big impact articles and to publish often.
Yeah, the pressure to publish and to keep tenure is just really, really hard, right? And we all know that researchers can rarely publish null results that don't show anything. So they really, really need the results to be significant. Oh man, it is really easy to lose that one data point that kind of kills your linear graph or something like that. How about some other incentives that are a challenge to researchers besides the publish or perish? There's a big one on the left-hand side. How about Colleen? You know some of this stuff. Come on, Colleen. What's it like at Texas?
Bruce, she put it in the chat.
Oh, she did. Okay, yeah, I can't see the chat and my slide.
I'll just read it if that's okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
feel free to put it in
short,
the chat.
short publishing timelines. Oh yeah, she has child issues. So right now, so as we often do. Okay,
Yeah.
so
I'll tell you, I have a friend of mine who is in the biomedical sciences in the vet school here at Texas A&M, and his daughter swam with my daughter, and he's got 3 daughters. And he came up for tenure, and he was dying because while they really tracked all the publications he wrote, what they really wanted to see from him was that large NIH, sorry. They wanted to see that large NIH grant before tenure. And his NIH grant came in 2 weeks before he had to go through the final review. And he would have been fired if that grant had not come in. So that's an amazing amount of pressure on people. So it's these incentives for publish and perish. Research funding is so competitive. If you don't know, when I applied to NSF grants, the average success rate was 8%. So 8 out of 100 grants were funded. And I couldn't have a career if I didn't get funded. So it was really a real problem. So the incentives are driving people to cut corners, and yet so many people don't. It's really a testament to a lot of things. So when we look at when we see in the news issues around research integrity and research misconduct, some of the aspects that you're going to see are around compliance. And you'll see it on your campus. And in compliance, these are federal agency efforts to protect America's research from foreign governments or other bad agents. And they are very focused on faculty disclosing three things: the conflict of interest, their conflict of commitment, and their conflict of overlap. Let's go through it. The conflict of interest is when a faculty member or a researcher has some kind of financial issue that may compromise the integrity of their research, their design, or the methodology that they choose. And when you have that conflict of interest, it's actually required by law that a faculty member disclose that. And those faculty that don't often get into trouble, and we'll see in a slide, in the next slide, somebody who didn't. The conflict of commitment is also something that faculty are required to disclose. And this is where they actually have to account for how much time that they're committing to each project. In the past, faculty it was fairly easy to keep getting grants and just keep overcommitting because you wanted the money to come in. And now they account for how much time you're spending on each grant. And you really, surprised, can't go over 100%. So that conflict of commitment. And then the challenge around conflict of overlap. And here, this is where you're getting funding from two different places, particularly a federal agency here in the United States and perhaps a foreign government, to do, in fact, the same research. And because they're going to two different countries, some faculty think that they can hide it. And so that conflict of overlap. These kinds of compliance issues are often controlled and run and managed by the vice president of research at your organization. And these kind of compliance things, you may want to teach this, or you may be asked to help get the word out that faculty have to do this. But generally, I'll bet you're not going to do too much of this work because compliance is something that is really more stick than carrot. And we can see examples of examples of issues where these compliance issues are challenged, and these faculty are going to jail. And fortunately, I was able to find an example, so I didn't have to use the Texas A&M faculty that was just arrested by the FBI. This is a faculty member from Ohio State who was recruited by the government in China to set up a lab in China doing the same kind of work he was doing at Ohio State, where he could transfer the research results to China so that they could take advantage of that science to develop new pharmacology, pharmaceuticals and things. And so when they caught that, this was both a conflict of interest and a conflict of overlap. And so he's in jail now. And we had somebody at Texas A&M who had a similar problem with NASA grants, where he was developing rockets and so on. So this is important. You're going to see a lot of news around this. But my guess is that this is less of a role of the library and more of a role of the VPR's office. What can be a really important role for a library is just what Melanie was making a case for, is that what we want to do is build the norms and values around scholarly communities so that those norms and values drive responsible practices. And when you look at those responsible practices, you're going to see a lot of things, a lot of practices that libraries have a hand in, like data management, publication, right? Research collaboration, peer review, and other things like that. We don't, we tend to not have so much interactions with protecting human research subjects or laboratory animals, though I guess at MSL you do have some, I'm sorry, in medical libraries, they do some work in literature reviews around animal-based research, which is really good. So it's this that we can get across in our own trainings and workshops for students and faculty. Let's look at some examples of things that are really, really interesting to talk about. Authorship is a classic problem. Authorship issues at Texas A&M are the single most common issue that drives conflict between researchers. People believe they deserve authorship or in a different role and so on like that. So helping students and faculty understand the appropriate roles where people merit designation as an author is really important. And in cases, you're making an author is somebody who makes a substantial intellectual contribution. And you have to evaluate that. It's not so easy, right, to figure it out sometimes. And certainly the order in which groups are put on a paper matters in many disciplines. So that's kind of interesting. Let me show you a new practice that we've been promoting here at Texas A&M. And in fact, I just was doing it yesterday. There's a movement among publishers and in the scholarly communications field to in fact extend authorship so that you actually move authorship to contributor, so that you describe the role of all the authors on a paper in terms of 14 different roles. It's called the credit taxonomy. And this example of what an author statement would be, I took out of Elsevier, and they were showing, they require this for many of their journals, where they ask each author on a paper to designate how did they contribute to a particular paper. Yesterday, I was talking to a faculty member in the Department of Communications who is going up for tenure, and I suggested that she do the same. She annotate her CV to designate the contributions she made for each of the papers, so that the reviewers could understand how she was contributing to those publications. So this is pretty interesting. Faculty and students find this real interesting. It is not common knowledge outside of the scholarly communications field. So it is something that you could easily bring to your campus. Across the TDL landscape, we have moved vigorously towards data management. And I can tell you there are all kinds of good practices that represent research integrity around how we manage data and how we use data and analyze data. And so you can embed then research integrity topics within data management workshops and other programs that you run out of your library. The way we handle data, the way we make that data available to other researchers, the way we annotate and manage our data has a huge impact on the quality of our answers, right? Crap in, crap out. And so bad data or poorly managed data is just not worth anything to anybody. And so understanding these practices and how they relate to research integrity can be something that's fairly easy to extend. And later on, we're going to break out into breakout groups. We're going to actually see a really good case study that Melody found around data management and the sharing of data in a collaborative team that I think you'll really like. Because when you first look at it, oh, this is easy. And then you start unpacking it, and it's like an onion. It has layers. Great. Peer review, of course, lots of research integrity issues around peer review. Being fair and effective as a peer reviewer, maintaining confidentiality is all embedded in research integrity. I have a phenomenally good story that in my little research community happened when I was much younger. When I was graduating and looking for a job, there were not that many other researchers who were graduating with me, and I kind of knew them all in the United States. And there was one guy from Florida who was very, very good. And he ended up going to a very good place. Many years later, we're all like associate professors, and a friend of mine had submitted an NSF grant and got turned down. And then about 6 months later, she's on a review panel in the same program, and she gets a copy of her own NSF grant proposal that was submitted by this person that we knew. And so either he or one of his team members had reviewed a proposal and taken it during that peer review, turned it down, and then resubmitted it to NSF as their own work. And they got caught. And I can tell you his career was over. That was done. So if we look at educational programs, and as you design, if you are interested and you go down this responsible conduct of research type of pathway, there's several reasons why this is a good thing, and your efforts are likely to be welcomed across campus. The very first reason is there are federal agency requirements for RCR training across campus. So both NIH and NSF has requirements that if you accept grants, which almost everybody in this room does, then responsible conduct of research training has to be available to students and postdocs and faculty members. And so libraries can contribute to that need on campus, and you could reach out to dean's offices or the vice president of research if you'd like to coordinate. There are several common goals for RCR training that often come up. It is important for people to be able to recognize and define the ethical issues in particular cases. They need to be able to identify the relevant stakeholders and the system that those stakeholders are from that are involved in those ethical issues. They have to identify value conflicts anywhere where values are conflicted, and be able to suggest alternative courses of actions or solutions that might mediate or the ethical issues. And of course, a lot of this is always up for dialogue and discussion. And so negotiation is a big part of that. So but these are common goals. And what you're going to find, in fact, that building a responsible conduct for research kind of educational program through workshops and other kinds of trainings is not very hard. Once you understand the issues, what you can take advantage of are the huge libraries of case studies that exist out there, and on all kinds of topics around in research integrity. And here are 4 different sources, but there are many, many out there. And these case studies are easy to get. They're well organized, so they can be found and taken very quickly. And I will tell you, they really promote interesting conversations, I hope, as we're about to see. right? And so on. So case studies make a great way to run a program, and it doesn't require a lot of work on your part to get ready. So that makes it pretty easy. So Melly, you want to describe what we're going to do?
What we're going to do now is we have 6 breakout rooms, and each one of the attendees has been automatically assigned to one of those breakout rooms. So all you need to do is sit tight. You will find you sort of will suddenly find yourself in a breakout room. Look in the chat, because if you haven't had a chance to read the case study before this meeting, you'll find the link to the case study, so you can quickly click on it and work through it. Bruce and I will visit the various chat rooms as we have a chance, and then Leah will bring us back together in approximately 10 minutes.
And watching it. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Good to see you. Hey, Alexa.
What are we watching?
Melody has not yet seen Bill and Ted, and so we're going to get her in sync with, you know, basically the core values of Texas Digital Library is
I've never
everything
seen Bill and Ted either.
Emily Johnson.
I know. I'll watch it. Now that I know that TDL
I haven't
loves
either.
it,
No.
so
I haven't
You
either.
know what we should do? We should like have a group watch.
that'd be fun.
That'd be hilarious.
We could do it office style, where like the TDL hangouts are like 30-minute segments of Bill and Ted Adventure.
That sounds fabulous. We have, as people are coming back, we're going to launch a poll. One second, and would love to know your thoughts on this. In what ways do you currently support or participate in research? We have all the options that we could think of, and if you have other ways that you want to share, go ahead and share them in chat. And Bruce, I think we're ready for you to take over. You're muted, Bruce Herbert.
Bruce, you're still muted.
Bruce, you're muted.
There we go. Yeah, actually, I'm a lot smarter when I'm muted, don't you guys think? But I got as far as breakout room number 1, and it was really interesting. And since Santi was there, and Santi does such a great job with digital libraries and digital collections, one of the things we did point out in the resources that we're sharing, and at least the things I could find, it is very heavily slanted towards sciences and biomedical sciences and engineering and things. And that's because NIH and NSF are driving it, driving a lot of this work. There are research integrity issues around the use of digital collections and digital libraries. There are integrity issues around in humanities. And in fact, this is something probably librarians know really well and could contribute to the literature in the development of case studies or other teaching resources for other fields besides the sciences. But we're going to go back to the sciences because that's where I'm comfortable. And, so what did you think of the what did you think of the case study? What the first thing we jumped on was, who owns this data? Justin, you're nodding your head. Who owns the data, Justin?
Well, we had a discussion because about the PI, we assumed the PI's ability to exclude one of the data gatherers from all of the data, which is that, I mean, from a copyright perspective, if you've collected something or put it together and you have the right to access it, it wouldn't really mean that you can, that you have to provide access to things that he might have gathered. So maybe keeping some of that data from one of the data collectors is more of an issue of PI's privilege, or, but do you own all of the data if you didn't collect it all? So I think rather it's more of an issue of kind of the contract of the grant, isn't it? It's just saying that you're in control of this data because you're the PI. it's different from ownership, but
it is a little bit. How about anybody want to add to that? There is an issue between ownership and control, kind of.
Right. And is data
Copyrightable.
copyrightable because it's fact? So I understand the like PIs want to control the data, but then it's not really like the collector's copyright. I also wonder, we didn't get to this in our discussion, but I wonder about like, what does NIH say about when and how and to whom or with whom the data gets shared as well?
Yeah, those are all excellent points, right? If it's funded and it says it's NIH funded research, then they're going to go by policies around data sharing and open access. And so that's kind of a control. Santi, who owns research data at the University of Houston?
The university does, and that's according to our institutional.
It's actually in your rules. It's
data
the
policy.
University owns everything.
That's right.
Yeah, and
I'm willing to bet most of your institutions have something like that. Now, it's not always that the institution owns it. Usually is, but not always. So that's something for sure librarians would want to be aware of and be able to articulate to the people they interact with and help along the way.
Yeah, it is an amazingly big misconception among faculty, is they think they own everything. No, they don't own anything. It came up with Melody just last week. Melody, when NIH awards a grant, who are they awarding the grant to?
The institution.
Yeah, the institution. They don't award.
And the institution is ultimately responsible for all compliance issues.
Yes.
Try telling that to your research deans.
Yeah, that doesn't always go well, does it? Yeah, really good. They so universities own research data that comes from funded research, but they really, they let the PI control it, right? And it usually isn't a huge deal for anything.
But here I do want to insert something about integrity and values, right? Because we're talking about rules and regulations, but really the heart of integrity is deeper than that. I mean, we can say who owns this data officially, right? But as the research begins, all the collaborators should have a conversation about this. We're going to generate this data. Well, owning the data and having access to the data are two different things. So how are we going to think about publishing it, and who gets first dibs on it? And what if we find two different ways to analyze the data and they're contradictory? How are we going to do that, right? And so to have those conversations up front and to have them as you're going along, that kind of openness is one of the values that researchers embrace. And openness doesn't just mean open access. It's easy to forget that. And so that candor and that interchange as you're doing the research is really important, no matter what the particular hot issue is that morning.
I think this case study was like the perfect example of the danger of making assumptions, because everybody involved in this process had made assumptions that, turns out were inaccurate. And so just seconding what Melody just said, having those conversations early and often is going to be key to making sure you don't run into these problems.
There's also some elements of really skillful facilitation that needs to occur over time. I've certainly been in research projects where we've had a difference of interpretation of data, right? And when you are at that moment, it's hard to get out of that, right? You're not sort of equipped with how do you deal with conflict that is sort of research based in many library schools or methods courses or anything like that. So not only having those intentional conversations at first, but being able to with care and sort of focus, lead people through that process is challenging.
Bruce, I have a question for you, actually, on that same line. So when you were talking earlier about, I forget what exactly it was called, but about, instead of delineating authors, delineate contributors on the paper,
Yeah.
and that's something that's kind of new. And have you run across, when you talk to anyone about that, is there, because my first thought was like, some people might not like that because it could be less impressive, like their role could end up on the list being, in their mind, less impressive than being an author on the paper. So have you is that something you've run across at all, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. From a misconduct aspect, the most amazing example I ever ran across was I was talking to the research integrity officer connected with Frontiers, the open access family of journals in Switzerland. And they were having a huge problem with not guest authors, courtesy authors, so papers would be submitted, and with a certain list of authors, the paper would be accepted, and then at the last minute, additional authors were being added to the paper. And it turned out what they were doing was selling authorship.
Wow.
They were selling authorship. It was outside the United States. How much would you pay to get your name on a paper? I was actually embarrassed because I could have gone into business and made millions. It's like $10,000 a paper. People were paying $10,000 a paper, and so it's a lot of money. So that's a real misconduct, right? Because now you're representing that person as somebody who's contributed to the paper, and they're going to get some kind of job benefits from that, where it's not. In other cases, you have cases, right, where people didn't really contribute all that much to the paper, but are put on as courtesy. It's not, you put them on and just because who knows, lots of reasons why and stuff like that. So yeah, that's exactly what the credit does, is it makes the system more transparent, and that's usually a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. How about in this case, in our case study? So we have this, the researcher, the PI, has this large database, and there are several issues in this case study. One of them is that Mary, the postdoc, believes that the data should be analyzed in a different way, which dramatically changes the conclusions. Is the researcher, he's got a weird name. What is his name? Henrik. Is Henrik engaging in misconduct? If she has a difference of opinion, what do you think?
Potentially.
Okay. And in what way, potentially?
I would say, okay, well, so from my understanding, the idea of when you're done with your data, you share it so that people can actually see the data and make sure you drew reasonable conclusions. I'm not going to say the right conclusions, but if he's leaving data points out completely and that's never going to be shared with anyone, and she's finding this, I would say that that's misconduct.
Can anybody defend Henrik's actions? Did he do anything to? He is leaving data points out.
It says he does.
I see Kate is nodding her head. Kate, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, it says that he does disclose all of his exclusions very specifically in his draft. So he's saying why he's doing it. So I would say both approaches are legitimate.
Yeah.
And, it's just, they just have very different approaches.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that I think both of them were acting fine. And in essence, let them meet in the literature. Remember, the papers will go through peer review and then they can argue, right? And data can be analyzed in many, many ways. And as long as you're open and transparent and you explain exactly what you did, it's when you hide the taking the data point out and you don't tell people you did that, oh man, that is really bad, right? Because it can really change your interpretation. We only have a few minutes left. Does Mary have an innate right to use the large data set after she moves away, leaves his group and takes another position?
I mean, after publication, it's going to be open, right?
Right. He's got to share it somewhere within proximity of publication. So she should be able to use it, right? I mean, that's what NIH does.
Yeah. John, you might know this. When faculty will comply with the NIH policy to share their data, but they hate doing it, what is a really common way that how do they act passive aggressive?
They contact me for the data.
Yes, they make it difficult.
Yeah, it's on a website.
Do it really slowly, right? There's all kinds of ways, and that's really.
I have people who just said, "Oh, it's all proprietary. I can't release it."
Yes, exactly.
It's all sensitive.
Yeah, all sensitive data.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so if the data set's required to be open, yes, she does have a right to the data, right? If it's not required, I will, at least in my field, the norms would be that she doesn't. That once she moves away, she doesn't necessarily have right to it. Now, you could absolutely talk about good mentoring practices here, and Stephanie smiled really quick, so you must have thought of something. Stephanie, what did you think?
Well, I just think that, yeah, there's a difference between what's required under the, the terms of the grant and what is a good idea to do as far as, like you said, mentoring.
Oh man, yeah. When is a really good time to have conversations about future access to data sets and co-authorship? And when is that? At the beginning or after the fact?
Before you start.
Always at the beginning, absolutely.
Yeah. Before you sign that.
In the chat, reminded, she put up 80% of researchers are afraid that they'll be scooped if they release data. They hate releasing data. The very first time I mentioned sharing data openly at Texas A&M, a very august and very distinguished engineering professor got up and said he would share his data over my dead body. That was really funny. Awesome. So we really only have 2 minutes left. Is that right, Leah? Okay. So I hope you found the case study interesting. What we really wanted to do was just expose you to case study methodology. I'm sure you know how to do it, but there are lots and lots of case studies and they are quite interesting. And because that libraries exist, it makes it fairly easy to get ready for a workshop or something. So what we're going to do, I hope you'll join us again at our next one. And what we're going to do there is actually help you create something, whatever it is that helps you, that could move you offering some kind of research integrity program. And Melody, go ahead, Melody.
Yeah, I was just going to encourage you, please take a look at the template before next week. It's just one page. If you can look over it, it's a template for an instruction module. It's designed to make your job easier. And if you get a chance to look over it, you'll come a little more prepared for the next discussion.
Absolutely. And so you have a little bit, if you wanted to dive down deeper, there's readings, there's links to a lot of case studies. You could see what's out there. You could think about what the needs are on your own campus. You have all this expertise in the room. We'll do the breakouts and get people to work together again. And the idea is that we have this quick exposure, a little time to read, and then you leave with something useful. Okay? And that's the plan for the workshop. And we are right at noon. Outstanding.
Perfect. Yeah, people are starting to peel off to go
Yep.
on to lunch or their next meetings, and just want to say thank you. Awesome. This was great.
Thanks for everybody. Thanks for speaking up too. Hope you didn't mind
Yes.
speaking on you.
And we'll see you same time, same channel next Thursday, and hope you all can make it. If for some reason you can't, we do have these recorded and you can view them and still be eligible to apply for the certification of completion. So
thanks for the claps. That's appreciated. Great. Okay. You guys have a great week. Stay sane and protect our democracy.